sky of stars and caught the red hot light of the North Star. She opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife.
Greetings and welcome back. Burkina Faso foils coup attempt, accuses exiled officers in Ivory Coast of orchestrating plot. The military-led government of Burkina Faso has announced it successfully foiled a major coup attempt aimed at toppling President Ibrahim Traoré. Their security minister, Mamadou Sana, said the coup attempt was led by current and former soldiers working with terrorist leaders based in Ivory Coast of masterminding the operation. What happens when a small African nation dares to break from Western control? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historic context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze these events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is what happens to the concept of sovereignty? What happens to determining one's destiny and improving the quality of life for those in your own country by controlling your own resources? My guest is the co-host of Voices with Vision on WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. He's a Pan-Africanist. He's an internationalist organizer and a member of Black Alliance for Peace. Netfa Freeman, as always, Brother Netfa, welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's always a pleasure, brother.
So President Ibrahim Traoré is the leader of Burkina Faso, having taken control of over the position following a coup, which he led against Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba in September of 2022. Since Traoré has been in power, Burkina Faso has played a key role in the withdrawal of 3 West African states from the regional body ECOWAS. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have formed the alternative, the Alliance for Sahel States. Netfa, is it fair to draw comparisons between President Traoré and Burkina Faso's earlier leader, Thomas Sankara?
Well, it's got to be fair because that's what the people are doing. They're doing that all the time, and the Burkina Faso situation right now allows them to invoke the legacy of Thomas Sankara all the time. They're actually see their project, what I would assert is a revolutionary project, as falling within the legacy of Thomas Sankara, and then they see Ibrahim Traoré as somebody who heroically led that charge and is right now leading that charge and is withstanding all forms, like you mentioned in the opening, all forms and attempts of subversion. And you know, the West, the way they do things, they actually think they always think things are about an individual. And even our people, the people there on the ground regard, the leaders that they feel like are supporting them and are working in their best interest and are courageous about it. They lift them up. That's what happens, right? But then at the same time, we can be mistaken. And, even under Sankara, there was a lot, and maybe not as much, not fortified as much. There was a lot that the people were doing. The people are advancing a revolutionary process. The people are creating self-determination in the form of food sovereignty and all kind of things, rights for marginalized people, women, everything. And so that's what's happening there. And we can see at every turn, just like with Sankara, that the West is trying to undermine that. And so they have a Thomas Sankara Center. I'm blanking on the actual name. It's called the Thomas Sankara Center there in Burkina Faso. And they actually just opened one just launched an opening of one in about a week or so ago in Niger, the Thomas Sankara Center.
In fact, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but the sister that's behind that was on the show in December.
Your name is Richardson.
There you go. Yeah, she was on the show. Thank you. She was on the welcome to the anyway. Welcome to the Netfa Freeman show. So I'm trying to figure out which way I want to go with it. Let's talk about the coup first. Let's do that. So apparently the coup was foiled, I want to say last week, but details of it are now starting to unfold. And it's interesting that you have U.S. General Michael Langley, head of AFRICOM, accusing President Traoré of misusing the country's gold reserves for personal protection rather than national benefit. First of all, if that were true, who in the heck is Michael Langley to accuse him of anything? It's his country. I think that's up for the people of Burkina Faso to figure out, not for Michael Langley to be complaining about.
I mean, there's a whole number of points. The first one that you raise is actually critical, and that people should not be fooled by this type of misinformation and unfounded misinformation. The first issue, as you pointed out, is the right for those people to determine that, and that there should be no business. There's no business that the United States has. It's not even the mission of AFRICOM. It's not even the mission of AFRICOM to determine what a government is. It's supposed to be about fighting terrorist extremism, which that country has determined that the United States Africa Command and the United States presence there, and as well as the French, was inept in fighting that and expelled them from the country. And so, for them to make these accusations and even talk about, for people not even to realize, well, however the gold and minerals or anything is used in that country is really up for that country to determine. Now they want to couch it as this individual person who's making these decisions. This is a pretext. I think we're really looking at a very dangerous situation here, because it's not just what Michael Langley is saying in front of the Senate. It's also these things like, the media advisory that the travel warning that the State Department put against Burkina Faso, saying it was dangerous, saying it's dangerous. It was just like about a week ago. It's a dangerous place to travel. There's terrorism, this and that. They've also had a demonstration. There were some Burkina Faso people who were in France. Why in France? Demonstrating, calling for the resignation of Ibrahim Traoré. Why would you go to France, the imperialist country, your former colonizer, to make this demonstration? What are you doing? And so we've seen this playbook before, where you're creating the pretext to have much more direct intervention there. Right now, they're trying to play it very careful. The imperialists, like the United States and France and all of the U.S. NATO axis of domination that we call it, because they don't want the optics of looking like they're, obviously going in and invading directly invading an African country, a decidedly Black African country, so to speak, unlike with Libya, where they could, the people don't even realize that Libya was an African country in some ways. But also it's the fact that Libya already happened and people know about it and it has not turned out well. They're really purpose, and this is really the purpose of AFRICOM, is to subvert it from within first, as the first attempt to destabilize the country, to create a pretext that paints it as some dictatorial military, just another military coup dictatorship that's unpopular, and that they need to save the people. So direct intervention will be in the forms of sanctions, which I think they already have sanctions on it. Definitely ECOWAS had some sanctions, but I think they lifted them. But those type of things that create this danger pretext, and then people, they will kind of accept whatever happens. And so Michael Langley also, and this was maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he was testifying in front of the Senate Armed Services, talking about, stating what you were talking about. Now, he's a appointee from the Biden administration, and we're already seeing moves that the Trump administration is angling differently. They're maneuvering differently in Africa. We must make no mistake that the world is very dependent on the unfettered access to the raw minerals and then the markets of Africa. There's going to be no just forfeiting that. However, how they do it will be different. And the Trump administration is, closing some U.S. embassies there and seemingly to creating a posture of more economic strong arming type of thing with the tariffs and all that kind of stuff. However, and so the Langley and maybe that people from that ilk they have to find a raison d'etre, so to speak, for a more direct intervention. And I think he's trying to appeal to, when you say the gold, that's the playbook that Trump seems to be using, right? Making deals for the minerals and things like that. And maybe he's trying to appeal to that. But,
As I understand it, Burkina Faso is the 5th largest gold producer on the continent, in the world, at least on the continent.
At least on the continent, yeah.
And so, as I understand it, what Traoré has done is he is bringing the processing of the gold in-house.
Right.
He's keeping he's taking the ore and processing it in-house instead of sending the ore out to be processed by a Western country and then sold on the market. Hence, increasing the profitability, basically allowing Burkina Faso to take full advantage of its natural resource. But somehow Langley has a problem with that. Let me, Robert Brown, thank you for that.
Right.
$5.
Well, he has to. I mean,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Langley, he's a rep. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Langley is an agent of U.S. imperialism. And U.S. imperialism, not just U.S. imperialism, but all of Western imperialism has plundered Africa, ever since, since the Berlin Conference and before that, and the Berlin Conference just was their negotiation. So they wouldn't have to fight each other over Africa. And so this is what's persisted. When you start doing projects like what you just described, the refining of anything, whether it be gold or cocoa, is it? And, the chocolate or anything, rubber, any of those kind of things, then you threaten, the international the economic configuration of the global economy that the West has been able to dominate. You're able to actually instead trade or export gold as the finished product, and then set your own prices and those type of things. You have control over it. And this is not what the United States wants. They want to be able to extract and take it from the ground. And so this is another reason why Langley sees that as a wants to talk about gold in this way and misshape what's happening there, because really at the ultimate, that's what they have a problem with. But we have to understand that one of the pinnacles of Pan-Africanism, the unification of Africa and the establishment of self-determination and the establishment of it under a socialist paradigm where these things are distributed by people, the working people are making the decisions about how to distribute their own wealth. We have to understand that that is what is needed for Africa. That, this is what is it's an example, of what other countries should be doing, and the other countries that are not doing that, who are actually really using, as compradors do, as the most, Kwame Ture called the most despicable leaders, where they actually take pittances from imperialism, and they do use it for their own benefit, and they do use and ask AFRICOM to protect them from, from their to protect their standing within a country. And so we need to see examples of what's happening, and they're we call it the Alliance of Sahel States, but it's quickly now the Confederation of Sahel States, because they've actually gone past being a military alliance to being an economic and political alliance.
Well, and that's a incredibly important point to make. I also, because people really need to understand the hypocrisy that General Michael Langley is engaging in here, as he makes this assertion, and it is nothing but an assertion, a baseless assertion, because notice he didn't provide any evidence. All he did was just make the assertion that President Traoré is using this gold for his own personal finance. What he's actually doing is he's using the gold to raise the standard of living for the people in his own country. And there are a number of other projects that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But, I didn't hear Michael Langley complain when Barack Obama went into Libya and overthrew Gaddafi. General Langley, you seem to be conspicuously silent when the United States went in and overthrew that leader. General Langley, you're not complaining about, as Netfa you just mentioned. Langley isn't complaining about the other African leaders that are on the American payroll, taking hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars from their own treasuries, putting them in Swiss bank accounts and living incredibly lavish lifestyles while their people are eating cattle feed. They even go to who did they? I just lost the country. Who do they just pay to go into Haiti? Who do the U.S.
Kenya, Ruto.
Yeah, Ruto. Well, Langley, you're not complaining about William Ruto selling out his people for chicken change, but somehow
and attacking the demonstrations.
And see what this takes
jailing people.
Exactly. This takes me back to Iran and the United States overthrowing Mossadegh in 59. It's the similar playbook. Mossadegh wanted to use Iranian oil proceeds to raise the standard of living for the people in his own country, and the British didn't like it, so they got the CIA to go in and overthrow Mossadegh. This is the same kind of rhetoric, the same kind of language, trying to set up the same kind of play. Netfa Freeman.
It is, and then I just have to mention this because you mentioned about Langley not talking about people like William Ruto. Well, the Biden administration rolled out the red carpet for him. Was right. I mean, literally, and then dined him at the White House and whatnot. But yes, what you're saying is important, and then I think that their concerned because it's really not just Burkina Faso. I think they're pointing at Burkina Faso because I think it represents the much more decidedly revolutionary project within that alliance, and that it also, but it's not. I don't know if you can even call any of them a weaker link or anything. That I don't.
Mhm.
Not only would I think that inappropriate, I just don't even know how to assess that. But I think what it has, and maybe they're trying to go after the strongest thing because of the legacy of like Sankara and the project there that they had there. But I think it's a very, they're walking a very difficult thing here, having, you know, all of a sudden these very popular uprisings against French neocolonialism and that spread to being anti-US neocolonial, anti-Africam, and anti-imperialist, very generally, saying we're gonna use our minerals for it. It's not even just Burkina Faso, different things that they're using, that they're taking control of in terms of not renegotiating trade agreements on different things and producing things in house and making sure that the trade internal to the country, and so that external foreign markets don't displace the local growers of things. And so this is something that they didn't expect, but also the military alliance, the fact that these are military people, you know, just like, you know, that have also can have the hindsight of being able to look at what happened with Thomas Sankara and form this alliance first, you know, and that also the legacy and the futility of neocolonialism among the people is very strong. So you can't really fool the people anymore, you know, as much as Bob. And the people are behind this, and this is what they are trying to figure out how to work. One thing that they have announced, and with this, that a lot of the people are suspecting that the rise in the terrorist groups and their incidents is about trying to destabilize this project. I don't want to say a rise of it, but yeah, it's been.
Well, in fact,
and they have a large portion of this country, Burkina Faso, I think.
That's my next question. Is there any indication, other than our assumptions, pretty valid assumptions, are there any indications that the United States is behind funding, training, supporting these groups that are attempting to foment these coups?
Well, then they're going to be smart enough not to do anything like that directly, particularly since AFRICOM's mission is supposed to be against these groups. But we can look at certain things like what happened in Mali. Was it? I don't know how long ago it was, where it was shown, it was exposed. In fact, there was a Ukrainian diplomat that admitted that they were training the Sahel, you know, the groups, and actually not just training, fighting alongside them, and were taking credit for having killed a number of even Russian, you know, combatants, militants that were there helping out through the Wagner group or whatever. And so they were taking, and so this is a direct U.S. ally, you know, fighting in a proxy war for United States against Russia, admitting to being in Africa and serving this purpose. So that's a very close indication that they're meddling, and then the United States has nothing to say about these kind of things. You know, they just have to.
They just sit back and try to claim that they have clean hands. Let's look at
one thing about these things. They don't have, because there's so little attention paid to Africa, unlike, you know, outlets like your show, that people don't really even know these kind of things. But people should be outraged finding out that the Ukrainians were in here helping the terrorists who the U.S. claiming to be fighting, and that they're actually, you know, this is the closest ally, one of the closest allies they have. People should be outraged, but I think we don't. Particularly African people, but people in general, just don't have a broad enough purview of what's happening on the ground, and also the implications of what's happening. And so, you know, and it's not necessarily people's fault. It's obviously because of the news is very tightly controlled in this country.
And not only Ukrainian mercenaries, but also there were a number of stories about weapons that the United States was allegedly sending to Ukraine, were mysteriously finding their way onto the battlefield in areas such as Burkina Faso.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So,
yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit about the positive things. There are a number of apparently Traoré has an incredibly broad vision and is implementing a number of programs to help develop not only the economy of the country, but the education level in the country, the quality of healthcare in the country. And one of the first things that I see that he's done is improved the quality of Burkina Faso Airlines. That I think he believes that in order for the country to move forward, then they have to have they've got to have integrated travel, and that for years foreign airlines have been the primary provider of access to the country, but now he's investing in Burkina Faso Airways. So not only fleet enhancement, but also improving the quality of the airport so that the country can control their own travel.
Mm-hmm. And this is an issue all over Africa, and people don't even think, and that this is a big one that you would think was in the likes of Muammar Gaddafi, when Muammar Gaddafi was doing these things. And we really should see these things as really be on alert that these are the types of things that that raise the ire, so to speak, of imperialism, self-determination, these kind of things. It's the airlines, it's telecommunications, it's these things that you would think should be domestic to a country and should not be controlled by anyone else, that once you start moving to try to do them, then there's issues with imperialism. They have to undermine it. And so this is a very interesting, it's a very good development. I think people should understand this. It also has implications for the entire continent in terms of being able to establish and work with continental travel, that's not dependent on, airlines from outside of the continent, island airlines or anything. And so if we can expand this to things like railways and that kind of stuff, which is even less expensive, I think, to have railways, but it's not as quick. Then that's something else. Another one of the projects that he's done is investing in a number of tractors to broaden the to expand the agricultural output internal to the country, so that there's food stuff. That's the part of the food sovereignty initiative. And so these are the kind of things that should be telling us what, and I tend to not speak so much about individuals, even though he's clearly a person that has integrity and leading this process. But, one person can't drive all them tractors, right? And one person can't make all the decisions. But these are the type of things that people should look at. If they knew about them, then they would be looking at sideways at comments like what Michael Langley and other people put forth. We would know that this is the playbook. And that we at the Black Alliance for Peace, we understood in the Africa team of the Black Alliance for Peace, we have a U.S. out of Africa network that is trying to, look at the machinations of AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, but also all forms of U.S. intervention. Back in, I think it was October, we understood, and we held a demonstration in Washington, D.C. They were saying, defend the Alliance of Sahel States. We know that we have to defend these projects. We have to make sure that what the maneuvers that imperialism does is not done under the cloak of night and undercover, and particularly not be just because we're not paying attention. That would be tragic for us to not look at, these Senate hearings like what Michael Langley's is testifying at, and not paying attention to what he's saying, and not understanding, doing our own fact checking and those kind of things, and being able to be on the ready to oppose all forms of intervention.
people sit back and they look at countries on the continent and they say, why are they so poor? Why are they so poorly run? Why can't they do anything for themselves? Why can't they? And here you have Burkina Faso that is implementing programs to improve the quality of life for the people in the country. And the United States is trying to undermine all of this. And this isn't anything new. This is no, hey, oh, wow, Wilmer, that's brilliant. But but I think the point needs to be made because another thing that he's doing, not only is he increasing cotton production, because I think Burkina Faso is the number one cotton producer in West Africa. So not only is he improving the agriculture of developing and producing cotton, but he also with that has implemented the cotton processing so that the raw cotton can be turned into a textile in-house instead of sending bales of cotton out to be processed on the market.
Mm-hmm. Another area, the textile mills, which we can actually, it reminds me also of Haiti is one of the main things that the imperialism gets out of Haiti, which you don't really hear about. But, like you said, the movements, the maneuvers, I don't want to say the maneuvers, but the going towards self-determination and self-reliance, economic self-reliance is indispensable, and diversifying it. So anytime that you can do things, and like you said, it's a big cotton producer. Every area, and this is not just Burkina Faso, I think all of the Mali and Niger are looking at this. Every area in which there is a major, what we would consider cash crop, or major export that's just extractive, whether it be from the extractive industries like gold or whatever, are being examined and re-examined. They started doing this sometime at least a year ago, maybe more, where they said everything is up for renegotiation, all of the contracts and things like that. What imperialism is afraid of is what you just said. For example, with cotton, you can make a finished product that you export. They don't get it from the ground up, but they can't sell it back to you, as a finished good. So it disrupts them in a number of ways. It disrupts the inherently exploitative nature of the capitalist imperialist global economy, how they maneuver in the global economy. And another thing that they're afraid of also, and this is tied to it, is the relationships with China in particular, but also Russia, we already talked about, and that China, and this is maybe where they I don't know if the Trump administration thinks it can compete with China when it comes to the type of bilateral deals that it makes, because it's still doing kind of strong arm tactics about it. But when it comes to China, these things strengthen, let's just say, the global South, and the multilateral nature of the world, or multipolar in nature, what's happening there in the world.
Unemployed Scholar, thank you for that super sticker. Thank you very much, as well as Mel W. Thank you as well for that contribution. Everything helps, everything matters, everything counts. We are here for you, but we can't do this without you. So thank you so much. One of the big things that I've seen in tracking what's going on in Mali is they are also developing energy independence by building nuclear plants. And I think they're doing this with the help of, I think it's China. Or is it Russia?
I can't remember. It's one of them, but I know you're correct that they're doing that. And one of the things is again, the uranium. Refining the uranium from Niger. I mean, it's a big mineral that they've been exploiting, the imperialism has been exploiting, and that we've seen some obscene disparities in terms of how much France is dependent on their energy is dependent and has been exploiting Niger minerals, and then the access to electricity. in Niger is just obscene in terms of regular people being able to have access to energy. And so this is, and because it was like seen right away in terms of it being a glaring contradiction. So this is another one of those areas where if in fact the uranium and that the not only is it's not just used for extraction and export, and it's hard to even call it export, but yeah, just extraction, because when they control the uranium mines and they just, I don't know, I guess you can call it export. Export, I get to me, it speaks of a country deciding to export something for in return for good. For something else, for money, whatever it is, exchange. But when imperialism dominates your minds and actually can even own them and just takes it out, I mean, or can you call it export? It's just basically raw extraction. It's plunder, And so what is happening in Africa right now is an example. How do we this is the decolonization process. People should see this as and maybe we should call it a neo-colonization process, given the situation here.
In fact, Carol Asbrom, thank you for that $10. She says, thank you. More shows like this, please. Also discuss recent Burkina Faso allying with Tanzania.
I unfortunately,
yeah,
I'm a little lost. I need
Carol,
to look into that. Thank you.
Both on that one. So we're gonna have to do some but see, that's why it's a show about exchange of ideas. Right. We got really smart people watching the show. So Carol, I was getting ready to talk about Burkina Faso and satellites. And I was gonna try to impress you with what I know about Burkina Faso and satellites, but I don't know that I'll be able to do that now. Because one of the things that Burkina Faso has done is they have formed an alliance with Russia. They're launching satellites, and for communication, to help to advance their communication capabilities, but also they're using these satellites to help them with agriculture. They're using the aerial satellite photography to help them direct water distribution to crops and help them survey the land. I mean, Traoré, man, is just kicking ass. I mean, he's getting down, and the world should be rallying to his support, not trying to foment a coup to overthrow the dude.
Right. And I think this type of genius, I mean, I'm not trying to dissuade you from giving the brother all due props, but when you can embark on, I think it demonstrates that when you can embark on any modicum of self-determination, you could also harness all of the genius and the education at your disposal. And there's a lot of, there's people that are educated, understand these things. You kind of have your advisors and you talk about things and you talk it out. It doesn't mean that he doesn't. I'm not trying to take anything. I have no idea, what, but we know that these things are a reflection of several heads coming together and thinking about all of the things that they can use and do. It also thinks about repurposing.
Yes,
the means in which how imperialism and other forces have used satellite imagery. I mean, satellites, because before AFRICOM was using, they were depending on the AFRICOM and the U.S. satellite imagery to fight the terrorist extremism, So once you determine, well, these folks might even be behind extremism, and once you even have technicians who are working with the U.S. people to see things, they can also glean what other things are possible. I think we have to. This is one of the, I guess, it's a principle or of maybe a revolutionary project, is that we should be able to look at things that that imperialism does, and maybe makes us privy, has some of us privy to, and if those people can realign themselves, make their allegiances for the people, then they have a lot to offer. This is where the intelligentsia comes in. We have to, and we have to be able to tap into those of us who are educated at certain lines and get them to see, imbue them with revolutionary principles and a revolutionary purview that makes them apply what they do know, the skills that they have, and the knowledge that they have, to the benefit of the people.
A couple of points here from the audience. Robert Brown Emil Smith, does America have a base in Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger? I know we had a drone base. Oh, go ahead. You know more about this than I do. Go ahead, Netfa.
With the drone base, and I can't remember. I can't pronounce it, in Niger, and that was a big. That was it's hundreds of millions of dollars drone base that they had just completed building before, almost just before they took a few years to build it. I don't think they had a base in Burkina Faso or Mali, but what the United States, what AFRICOM does is have what they call lily pad bases and other and non-enduring bases. They have these different terms for these things. And so if you have a comprador government that's beholden to U.S. imperialism, they'll give access to the military bases of the country to the U.S. soldiers and whatnot. And they invite in, the special operations forces and the military advisors and whatnot. And they actually will have troops on the ground there in that base operating as if it's their own. So in effect, it's like a U.S. military base, but it's not officially a U.S. military base. The U.S. has if I'm not mistaken, about 20 something, closer to 30, but 20 on the side, military bases on the U.S. on the African continent, but the rest are what we call a lily pad type base. What they call something like that, where they're operating and using the bases, and even not just the bases, but the troops of other countries to do their different special operations and whatnot.
And Willie Hicks.
I'm sorry, one more if I forgot. That we met with, when we were meeting with the charge d'affaires of Burkina Faso, he said, no, there's no more. Now, this doesn't speak to the app. So if they have bases there, they don't have personnel there anymore. So I should say that. And so they've been expelled.
Willie Hicks says they used to have a base in Niger, but they were kicked out of that country.
Right.
Okay. Right. Robert Brown, where does Pan-Africanism stand in Africa at this time? How can Africans in the diaspora help build bridges of solidarity with the people of Africa, because the struggle is interconnected?
Great question.
That's a Netfa Freeman question. Other than Netfa, what is your name?
This person asking this question actually has the name of one of my political mentors. So I don't know. It might be coming from him. He might be trying to put me, trying to ask me, a question to put But Pan-Africanism, and I think it's very interesting. We should define Pan-Africanism clearly. I think Pan-Africanism has been defined and thought of in different ways. Those of us who identify. Are you still there? Am I still there?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. You're good.
Am I still? Oh, okay. So those of us who identify as revolutionary Pan-Africanism define it very precisely. It's not like an ideology. It's not vague. Liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. I'm speaking as a Pan-Africanist, not necessarily as Black Alliance for Peace, although we have the Black Alliance for Peace has organizations that hold this view, like Pan-African Community Action, which I'm a member of, and also the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And that it's important for it to be this objective, and that what it says, and where it gets directly to this question without taking too long, is that all African people, all people of African descent, no matter where they live in the world, are tied, have our destiny and our liberation is tied to the physical liberation of the landmass of Africa. And that those people who preside on Africa, those of us who preside on Africa, if an African continent can be established that is socialist, in other words, all of the resources and minerals and all of those things are used for the benefit of people. If people are able to get, free healthcare and those kind of things, the state or the government apparatus is able to administer that. That's what socialism is. In other words, the decisions are being made by the working people who are producing and contributing these things. Then it's really the only way to have democracy. This will also impact the standing of African people other places in the world. In other words, we'll have a land base of support that will be able to leverage its weight and its support for us in other places in the world. So we should want that. When it comes to, because there's another part of the question that I want. So those of us who are Africans who reside outside of the continent of Africa, understanding this to be a very important objective, that we create a one unified Africa that also has the capability of leveraging the interests of African people worldwide in its situation in the world, the whole global economy or the United Nations or whatever. We should be fighting for that. We should be organizing ourselves. We must be an organization. The only way you can do anything significant for the continent of Africa is to be an organization. So when we say organize, it's not just a slogan. It means getting an organization that's fighting for the liberation of your people. Not any organization. It's got to be a revolutionary organization. It's got to be Pan-Africanism and not some ADOS thing that thinks that we just American descendants of slaves, but that we understand that we're African. And that as those living outside of the, African continent, particularly within the United States, our situation by and large as a people is that of a colonized people. We're domestically colonized by U.S. settler colonials, the U.S. settler colonial capitalist patriarchal project. And so we have to fight for that. Any victory that we can make within the United States, particularly exposing the ravages of the United States on the continent of Africa, is a victory for Africa. For the people on the continent of Africa. Any victory that they can have on the continent of Africa brings them that much closer to advocate and sustain, and leverage some impact on our conditions, the conditions we face outside of Africa. And so we have to be organized. We got to engage in mass political education of our people, wherever we find ourselves, about Africa and about our own conditions and how they mirror each other in terms of they're basically the same condition. The neocolonialism that our people face on the continent of Africa, those are essentially the same issues that we face outside of Africa, particularly in the United States, but anywhere else is neocolonialism. And, where our people they put our people up front as if they are our leaders, but they're really puppets for the, the US, EU, NATO, imperialists and Western dominance. And so it confuses our people. We have to be, made to understand that our interest lies with, the interest of Africa and African people and vice versa. And so, I don't know if that answers the, question well enough. But.
Well,
and we can actually, I'm sorry, one last thing is that, because I don't want to make it too abstract, we have to figure out ways to create transcontinental projects and programs that connect us with each other. It's not just some kind of thing, like a vague notion or idea. We have to figure out how to do that. One of the things that the Black Alliance for Peace is doing, we have this U.S. Out of Africa network that I told you about, that I mentioned, and that part of that network is a steering committee that is comprised of representatives of people representatives of parties and formations, radical parties and formations on the ground in Africa, and we're working together to figure out how to address this issue about intervention.
Curtis Cobb, thank you very much for that great answer. Thank you, Netfa. Curtis Cobb, thank you very much for that super sticker. Jonathan Soul, thank you very much for that as well. And getting back to the Tanzania question, Burkina Faso and Tanzania have recently taken steps to strengthen their bilateral relationship through diplomatic engagement, economic cooperation, and cultural exchanges. And they're doing direct engagement. Earlier this month, a special envoy from Tanzania, President Samia Suluhu Hassan, visited Burkina Faso to discuss enhancing relations between the two nations. So there's a lot going on, not only between Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, but Tanzania as well. And so with that, I hope, Carol, that quick response help save the show.
The internet, man. These are the internet. You can
no, it's my producer. It's my brilliant producer, Melody, that did that. Trade between Burkina Faso and Tanzania has seen significant growth over the past 5 years.
Oh, that's good.
Exports have increased to an annualized rate of 28.6%, growing from $66.9 thousand to $235 in 2023. See, having brilliant producers is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
And I wonder if I can say something about it. Is that it's interesting when you have this example. First, we have to look back at the history of the Pan-African movement on the continent, and starting with the independent, during the 50s and the 60s, and countries becoming independent and be calling for decolonization and whatnot. It created like an affinity, an African, a continental identity and pride. And so that legacy lasts now to the point where an example can emerge, like Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, and then also solidifying a confederation and first an alliance and confederation that speaks to the times of Nkrumah and all those, where there was an effort to unite the continent of Africa. It's going to be hard even for the compradors. And I'm not saying that Tanzania is I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is it opens up new avenues and new doors. People cannot, the Africans on the continent cannot keep overlooking, what's happening in these countries. We see that the African Union and even, the African Union is incredibly silent about. They didn't want to go along with, they couldn't really go in good faith or even with, and keep the support of their people, go along with invading, because they were talking about invading Niger originally when they first took it. And they didn't want to go along with that, but also it was very unpopular. But just the idea, the continental unity that has a legacy, a historical legacy that goes quite far back, is also attributed to this can attribute and contribute to newfound avenues of cooperation and projects.
Are you getting any sense from other people that you talk to in other neighboring countries, the impact that Traoré is having, not only in terms of just Burkina Faso, but the image that he is promoting? Is he raising this sense of self-sufficiency and sovereignty? Are other people gaining strength from what he is doing in his country?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I want to say it's not even just Burkina Faso, but there was a conference in November. I think it was November. We sent a delegation there. It was in Niger, and that the people came from that conference. I can't remember the name of it. It was solidarity with the Alliance of Sahel States or something like that. And that there were people from all over the world coming to that conference, all over the world, not just in Africa, but all over Africa, but all over the world. And one of the things in our and I think you've had Tunde on here before, one of our Tunde on. Yeah. And he went, and he represented, came back with a very detailed report, just talking about the inspiration. It was, I don't know how many people were at this. It was quite a few people, quite a number of people, and the different presentations about the projects going on the ground in the various countries, the other people in terms of their attitude toward defending the Alliance of Sahel States, the welcome, the regard that they have for Ibrahim Traoré and all of the other leaders, was just so fascinating. I wasn't there, but I felt like I was there when he gave the report. He came back with photographs and everything.
That brother is incredibly detailed.
Right? Yeah, it was, and it's we have it on our website, but I don't know if it's easy to find. But if people wanna copy the report, I can send a link, and you can just email me at netfa@blackallianceforpeace.com. Remember, my name is spelled NETFA. blackallianceforpeace.com at Black, and then I can make sure you get that link. But I think that's a somewhat, I hope that somewhat answers your question. I think this is it's an inspiring project. And then, because remember, there was a moment, and I'll end with this, there was a moment where neocolonialism was so firmly entrenched across the African continent. We didn't know where we were going to see bright spots. And then in 2011, they got rid of Libya, and they were always trying to undermine the land distribution in Zimbabwe and things like this. And now all of a sudden emerges these projects, that imperialism cannot stand.
And land, I'm glad you mentioned land distribution, because that is one of the things that if you want to get the colonists goat, if you want to start talking about redistributing land, and man, Peggy Park Miller, thank you for that super sticker. Greatly appreciate it. Let me see what it is. I need to see what the new president of Namibia has said, demanding reparations from Germany for the genocide in 1904 and 1908. And because they're also, of course, working on getting money back to Haiti from France on that move as well. Netfa Freeman, hey man, if nobody had ever heard of Black Alliance for Peace, I give you the floor to explain the significance of the organization, why people need to why people should support Black Alliance for Peace.
So we just had what birthday is this? So we had we started 2017. And my math is bad, and I just had a birthday, and April 4th was the Black Alliance for Peace birthday, and so we're part of the Black radical tradition, so to speak, that's inherently anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-neocolonialism, all that, self-determination, anti-patriarchy, all that kind of stuff, and decolonization. And so we started also looking at the hyper militarization that was becoming a feature of U.S. imperialism. I mean, it's been a feature for a while, but it became increasingly, as we could see, and the billions of hundreds of billions of dollars U.S. gave, and that also our first major campaign, was U.S. out of Africa, shut down AFRICOM, and so that was and so we see that as one, if we're gonna, we're not, and it's not a pacifist organization. We're not a pacifist to just believe in, this kumbaya peace. We realize peace is a condition that we have to struggle for. We have to fight for peace, and that it's something that comes out of the popular struggle of people against the ravages of neocolonialism and imperialism and capitalism and those things. And so we achieve it in that way. And that we adhere, we understand, acknowledge the rights of people to struggle against these things by any means necessary. So that's the kind of peace we're talking about. And so people can come to our website is blackallianceforpeace.com. We have both individual and organizational membership. So the organization I'm with, Pan-African Community Action, is a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, as well as a number of other organizations. And then also people can join as individuals. And so we've expanded quite a bit since then, and we've, holding down the line of anti-imperialism. And so our tagline is no compromise, no retreat. And so we've been taking positions on all of these very difficult positions that the U.S. propaganda makes difficult. The U.S. proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, everything in Somalia, their proxy war in the Horn of Africa, proxy wars and different destabilization in Africa. I mean, so, and then we also have the campaign around the zone of peace in the Americas. And so Nuestra Americas is, our Americas, establishing it as a zone of peace, taking that off the CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States in 2014, that called for, in Havana, Cuba, called to establish the region, the hemisphere, as a zone of peace. Well, we building the civil society popular movement component of that campaign is what Black Lives for Peace is doing. And so we encourage people to get involved with the various aspects of our anti-imperialism. The overarching campaign is to stop the war against African people in the U.S. and abroad. So we recognize also that a war being waged against us inside the United States with the 1033 program, militarizing police forces and cop cities and all of this stuff. So this is what we're trying to do.
And Carol must have really appreciated our response about Tanzania, because she's just contributed another $10 super sticker. And she says, also start with your small children, encourage pen pals in schools to school relationships with African elementary and high schools. We need to know each other. Carol, that's a great point. That's a great point. I had one more question, and now I forgot what the question was. So with that, you, Netfa, have gotten us in the schedule today in a very challenging time. So I really appreciate your joining us today. And I know that this was an issue that you really wanted to discuss. So I really appreciate your commitment and your fitting us in, because it would have been very easy for you to say, no, we'll do this another day. So my brother, thank you. Greatly appreciate it. And as always, look forward to having you back.
Look forward to being back, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Folks, again, I got to thank Netfa Freeman for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Immigration attorney Mark Shmueli is going to join us tomorrow to give us some really good insight into what's going on right now with the Trump administration trying to deport a number of other Venezuelans to El Salvador. And the Supreme Court came out about 1 a.m. Saturday morning and said, cease and desist all deportations. My language, not theirs, but that was the point. So Mark Shmueli tomorrow is going to join us to discuss deportation. Please follow and subscribe. Thank you all so much today for your generosity. We greatly need this. As I say all the time, we are here for you, but we can't do this without you. Subscribe. Those of you that are watching on other platforms, please subscribe via YouTube, leave a review, share the show. All the links are below. You can now go to the site and watch old programs, get caught up from analysis from shows past. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the remainder of your day. Peace. Have a great one. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.